everybody, Mountain Grandma here, and today I'm going to share with you 3 recipes for making cake mixes in a jar. We've got yellow cake mix, spice cake mix, and chocolate cake mix. These are the equivalent to a box cake mix that you would purchase at the store, so it's a great substitution for those without all of the unhealthy ingredients. And this is for Cake Fest 2026 that I'm hosting with Tina over at Life in the Piedmont. More information down in the description box down below, including about the giveaway. So let's go ahead and get started. Here's what we're going to need for the yellow cake mix. A simple 4 ingredients. We're going to need flour, salt, baking powder, and sugar. Pull those out and let's get started. All right, in this bowl, I have 2 1/4 cups of flour, and to this, I'm going to add in 1.5 cups of sugar. You could use an alternative sweetener if you wanted to. And to this, I'm going to add 3.5 teaspoons of baking powder, and I'm going to add a teaspoon of salt. Now, I'm going to go ahead and whisk this all together, and you want to blend it really well before you put it in your jar. I will have the instructions for how to do this down in the description box down below. But to cook this, you'll add in 1.5 cups of softened butter, 2 tablespoons oil, 1.5 cups milk, 1 tablespoon vanilla, and 3 eggs. You'll bake it at 350. If it is a 9x13 glass pan, 25 to 30 minutes. A 9-inch round pan, 20 to 25 minutes. Cupcakes, 12 to 15 minutes. And a bundt cake, 20 to 25 minutes. I'll have all this in the description box down below. All right, now that I have this mixed up well, I'm going to go ahead and get this put in my jar. What's fun about having these cake mixes in a jar in my pantry is that I'm still cooking from scratch, but I'm doing it in an easy way. These are the equivalent of a box cake mix. So that means they're just as fast. There's less of a mess. You know, you add the extra ingredients, and I'll have all of the recipe down in the description box down below, but they're just super easy. And I love that part of it. Plus, since it's a 1-to-1 replacement of a cake box recipe, that means you could also use it to make a dump cake if you wanted to make one of those. And there's some of those great recipes in this collaboration, by the way. Okay, moving on. All right, now I'm going to do the spice cake mix, and it's basically the same recipe, but we're going to add in some pumpkin spice seasoning that you see here to this. So I've got 2 1/4 cups of flour. I'm going to add in 1.5 cups of sugar. And then I'll add in 3.5 teaspoons of baking powder. This is also like 1 tablespoon of baking powder plus 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder. 3.5 teaspoons. Also a teaspoon of salt, so we'll get that added in there. And lastly, our 3 teaspoons, or 1 tablespoon of your pumpkin spice seasoning. Now, I'm going to go ahead and mix this all up, and then we'll get it put in our jar. Another couple of tips I want to share with you about these cake mixes in a jar. Have you ever seen the recipe for making cookies where you take a spice cake mix and you combine it with a can of pumpkin and you mix it up and it makes pumpkin cookies, for example? And that's just one combination that I can think of off the top of my head. But another thing you can use these mixes for, and they also make great gifts. Decorate the jar up and you've got a wonderful gift in the jar for whatever season you happen to be celebrating. There's that one. Okay, let's move on to the next cake. All right, for the chocolate cake, we are going to start with 1 3/4 cup flour. We're going to add in the 1.5 cups of sugar. We're going to add in 3/4 cup unsweetened cocoa powder. We're also going to add in 3 teaspoons, or same as 1 tablespoon of baking powder, and 1/2 teaspoon of salt. All right, I'm going to get this whisked up, and then I'll be putting it in the jar. Now to cook this one, you're going to be adding in a 1/2 cup of butter, 1 1/4 cups of milk, 1 tablespoon of vanilla, and 3 eggs. You'll also be baking this at 350. The baking time will be the same as it is for the other cakes, the other cake version, and that will all be down in the description box down below. Another thing I want to mention about making cakes in a jar and other things like this that are in a jar is it pretty is much the same thing as baking from scratch. You're absolutely baking from scratch, but you have things pre-prepared so that you can bake from scratch in a much easier way, because all of us have busy lives and we don't always have the time that it takes to, just start all this all over again and bake from scratch. But it makes it quick and it makes it easy. Another thing I want to point out here that I'm doing with this chocolate mix, because if you think about the ingredients, you have a little bit more than you did with the other cake mix in a jar that I shared. So in between every scoop, I'm trying to kind of rattle it in and tap that jar so that all of that, the powdered ingredients settle there really well, and I don't run into a problem of not being able to put the lid on the jar. But it fits perfectly. Just make sure you do that with this chocolate one. And there you have it. Here are the 3 jars. We've got the yellow cake mix, the spice cake mix, the chocolate cake mix. Next thing you need to do is make the labels. And I'm going to show you how I did it. I made 1 paper format with all of the labels. I used a template and then just kind of, plugged and chugged and cut these out, put them on some harder cardstock paper and glued them. But I have that main page because look at, there's my recipe for how to make it. There's my instructions for how to bake it. And then I just taped them to the jar, but I've already got that label saved and in a binder for the future to be able to make these again and not have to go and, do all that all over again. Included on the label, I have when they were made, and aren't they adorable? I mean, they're really cute with some, ribbon and such. They'd make a perfect gift, and I just love having them on the shelf. Thank you all so much for watching. I sure appreciate it. And I hope you check out all the other videos in this wonderful Cake Fest collaboration. And until I see you next time, everyone, keep your joy, folks.